Hello and welcome to Troublemakers. My name is Rogers George. I'll be your host today. And today we are going to talk about a principle that is called Make New Folks Feel Welcome. It's written by Jonathan Matthews on the Beautiful Trouble Toolkit. You can get it on the website and read through it so that you can understand better. And to talk about this specific episode, we have in the studio Rebecka. Please welcome and tell us about yourself.
Thank you. It's nice to be here. To tell something about myself, I'm an architect, and I volunteer for an organization called Architects Without Borders that works globally with architecture as a tool to promote democratic development and climate justice with different kind of projects.
I like that. Okay, then I will not waste more of your time. I'll just go directly into the question. Can you remember a time when you were in a new group or space, and what made you feel welcome or what made you feel not welcome?
I would say that the number one thing to make me feel welcome is how I am approached by other people. With smiles, openness, curiosity. I think that's the number one thing to make me feel welcome. Secondary, because I am an architect, I work with spaces, physical spaces. It would be to be able to enter a space, it can be outside, inside, on my own terms. To find, for example, if there's a lot of people, to find an area where I can maybe observe a little bit before I go in and get an overview and then choose how I want to interact in the space.
That's nice, because I don't think if many of the open spaces that are available, they have that segment of like a place where you can like go and then maybe get to know a lot about the entire place before getting in. So maybe that is a note not to take to everyone who is working in your field. And I think it's a good cause to like get people to feel welcome to the place, at least to know the place better before they choose to get into. So what does the term being welcome mean to you?
I think being welcome is about feeling a desire from the group or from the space that I'm allowed to be there. And the people tolerate me and hopefully even encourage my participation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And in your practice, how do you approach designing or organizing spaces where newcomers feel like they belong?
So I'm an architect in Denmark, and I have my own studio. I work a lot with public spaces, especially learning spaces in schools. I think I have a quite Scandinavian approach to welcoming people, in the sense that we always want to make people stay and use public space as long as possible, and to feel as welcome as possible. One parameter that I think is very important is that whatever space you design, that there is place for people to just come and sit down without necessarily having to go to a cafe or having to pay for a service, that they have this graduation in spaces, so that everyone can find their own spot.
Okay, for the sake of people who are not familiar to this Scandinavian approach, can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Definitely. So I can tell you about a project that I did when I was a student, where we were designing a public building and designing a cafe next to it. And one of the teachers looked at my project and said, "But where can I sit if I cannot afford a $4 coffee? Mm-hmm. Where do I then sit?" Mm-hmm. And that was a big game changer for me in the way that I design, to make equally nice spaces where people who do not want to spend that money, who just wants to come and stay.
True, I agree. Okay, as an architect, how do you design spaces that are inclusive to newcomers or outsiders?
I work a lot with the concept of friendliness. In a lot of my projects, you can see that the rooms are quite scaled down. In Denmark, we talk about human scale when we design. Mm-hmm. And to create a sense of home in a way. Because if you think about your house, it's probably quite small, quite cozy. And I think sometimes in big public spaces, we go a little bit over the top. We create huge spaces. And I like to use smaller rooms where it's appropriate, but still bring in a lot of daylight, natural elements where I can. I think it's very calming, and use a lot of tactile materials. Wood, for example, is a material that I think calms a lot of people. Yeah.
Okay. And are there principles in physical architecture that mirror the idea of making new folks welcome in social movements?
Yeah, I think it's circling back a bit to what we talked to before. Different types of spaces, so people can find their own place where they feel good. And think in terms of democracy in spaces, that there is space for everyone, not only the people who can afford to enter a certain space. And then this being aware of the human body and the scale of the human body, and not every room does not have to be huge and to be special.
I like the idea of democracy and design. Just to talk about it, can you tell us a little bit more so that we can get a better understanding about it?
Yeah, I think there's many levels to design in a democratic way. One thing that I'm very happy about as an architect in Denmark is that since we pay a lot of taxes, we have a lot of nice public buildings and a lot of nice public spaces because that's where the taxes go. So a lot of the architecture that we work on is what I would consider for the people. Right now I'm working on a public pool with a harbor bath facility where the outdoor bath is going to be free for everyone. And the pool space is not going to be expensive at all because it's owned by the municipality. So I think simply just creating spaces is number one.
Okay.
Very accessible for everyone. Yeah.
That's nice. Okay, how can spatial design either foster or hinder a sense of belonging?
I think there's a lot of ways that public space design can hinder a sense of belonging. One topic which is very interesting right now, that's being talked a lot about, is accessibility, universal design. That even a person who's, for example, sitting in a wheelchair should be able to go to whatever they want without being worried that they're not going to be able to access because there are no ramps or there's no toilet, etc. So I think that's very important that you think about that when you design the space, that it should be for everyone. Another thing that's talked a lot about since I'm designing a pool is the changing rooms. We have gendered changing rooms, women and men, and it's definitely a discussion. What if someone has a different gender identity? Where should they then change to? Have we made space for them? And then I think just in terms of friendliness, in Denmark we have this concept called hygge, which is coziness, and we try to integrate that in the design in general, and for spaces to feel warm, welcoming, and make you happy. A lot of urban spaces today are very rough. They have a lot of concrete, maybe not so many plants, and people can feel uncomfortable, people can feel not safe. And I think the feeling of not being safe is also excluding, even if nothing bad ever happens in the space, just the people walk in and they have a feeling is bad enough.
I think for many people they do misinterpret the field that you're working in, architecture, and many of them just consider it as the designing of buildings and rather not the entire surrounding. I like to bring in the aspect of plants into this design. Like, how can actually plants be a subject or something to consider whenever designing? And what are the benefits of actually considering plants? Because with the urbanization incoming this wave right now, we do not have enough vegetation, especially in towns or cities.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's causing problems on multiple levels. In many countries, you talk about heat islands. Even in Scandinavia, it's one of the coldest areas in the world. They can actually measure a significant temperature difference in areas with less plants and more plants. I think it has a very important role to be in contact with nature in our everyday life, especially in my work with schools and kindergartens. We integrate plants as one of the main elements because there's so many studies that shows that when you are in contact with nature, you're calmer, you're more focused, you're also more creative, there's less aggression between humans when they're moving in a natural area. And one aspect that I think is very important is to foster a sense of connection to nature, because when we care about nature, we want to protect it. And I think it has an extremely and very underestimated role when it comes to climate change. If we foster a young generation that have a love for nature, a passion for nature, they will, in a much higher degree, be willing to sacrifice comforts of their own life in order to protect our planet in the future.
In your work, have you collaborated with community-based movements, or activist groups? What lessons did you learn?
Yeah, I would have to think about that. With activist groups, I don't really think that I have done that in my work. I am working actively to work with users, especially users who are not necessarily getting a voice in the architecture scene. When I mean users, I mean the people who are going to use the building in the future. So when I work with primary schools, I have a project now together with 3 schools in Copenhagen where we're doing architecture workshops with the students. And they are designing the drawing and their building models of their future schoolyard, how they would like to see it. We're designing outdoor classrooms together with them. So they're from 9 years to 14. And we're actually designing a project from the input that we're getting. So I think that's a really nice way to make people think about the spaces that they're moving in and what they would like to see for the future.
Okay, I like just to like get an understanding about it. So let's say if you were to work with an activist group or something, you're saying what you would do is to actually include them in the process of your designing so that they could actually be part of the envisioning of their to be built space.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It would be very interesting to have that kind of project. I would separate, are they designing a space for themselves, or do they have a vision of how they would like, for example, a public space to be designed, and to work with them, to understand the values and the thought processes. I find that many activist groups have very interesting ideas and thoughts, and are questioning norms in society. And it's very interesting for architecture to take the kind of for architects to take the kind of ideas and transform them into physical spaces.
And from your understanding, how would an activist place or space look like once from an architecture point of view?
I would say that, of course, it would depend on the activist group. In general, if I was to design something, I think activism is all about ownership and thinking for oneself and taking space in the world. So I think I would try to design a space that is flexible enough for everyone to be able to put their mark on it and to transform the space into what they think is appropriate.
Okay. With architecture, apart from it being a field or a study, I think there is a way that it can be integrated into leadership forms and so forth and so forth. So, why do groups struggle in retaining new members, and how can architecture, literal or organizational, help shift that?
So just to understand the question about, is it about how activist groups can get questions?
It could be any kind of group, because I'll try and rephrase it again. Like some groups do struggle in retaining new members. Let's say somebody can visit them today and then they just see the place or the space and then they decide like this is not for me. So the reason could be an organizational architecture failure, or maybe the physical architectural failure. So how can architecture in general like change that? Like, how can somebody actually get into a space and then they feel welcomed just because of either their organizational architecture or their physical architecture?
That's a very interesting question. As an architect, you always want to like go further and ask more questions, really get into the root of the problem, like ideally get a sense of what do the people say themselves, why did they leave? I think it's very important to talk to the actual people and hear that from them. In terms of creating spaces where people feel at home, I could imagine that a place that facilitates both more formal meetings, but also having, for example, a lounge type of space or an area where more informal social connections can be made, could support people staying longer, meeting each other more. I actually, when you ask about it, it comes to mind a community space in Copenhagen where I was talking to the owner, and he said that they made it not too easy for the users. For example, it's very hard to find the toilets there.
What?
And he said that they did that on purpose because they want people to ask. So it's actually very hard to find your way in the space. So you have to talk to people and ask all the time, I'm sorry, where is this room? Where is this space? And he says that the number of interactions have gone up significantly since they removed the signage.
Ooh, I like the thinking. Okay. What are small but powerful things we can do to make people feel seen or valued when they first show up?
In terms of the space?
Yes.
That's a very interesting question, actually. I don't want to say something too fast either.
Take your time.
I think people feel welcome in spaces that are simply beautiful. Maybe it's a cliche answer, but I like the idea of people walking into a space and maybe for 1 second forgetting about social pressure or expectations and maybe just admiring the space they're in. It doesn't have to be about the building. It could be about the nature. It could be about the view, about the beautiful sunlight, and just having that sense of relaxation in their nervous system before they go and do whatever it is that they're supposed to do there.
I like you said well. So it's like I'll have to find you afterwards so that we see how this Samara Michelle studio could feel the same for someone who is entering for the first time. Okay, we are on our final questions. If the idea of making folks welcome was a building or space, what would it look like?
To me, personally,
Yeah.
it could also be a cultural thing. I'm from Sweden originally, and for us, the idea of a comfy, homey space is a wooden space, like a wooden house, wooden floors. We would definitely have a strong connection to nature in the house somehow, like big windows or a terrace space, this kind of middle area between outside and inside. And we use a lot of warm lighting in Scandinavia. It's something that really affects us in a positive way. I'm sure another person could have a completely different answer if they're from another place. But I think that's, for me personally, when I feel really welcome. Yeah.
If there's that wooden feeling when you enter a space.
Exactly.
I like. Thank you so much. Is there anything that you'd like to add to this conversation that we have had?
I think after this conversation, I would be really interested to work with activist groups and create a building together and kind of have a think about what could come out of that.
Thank you so much. And just in case there's any listener who has listened to this conversation and they would like to get in touch with you, is there a way they could find you?
Yeah, sure. My name is Rebecka Blomqvist, and my studio is called Blomqvist Architecture, or Arkitektur in Danish.
Well, thank you so much. I hope you find your way to Rebecka. And thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please do connect with us on our Instagram page, Troublemakers the Podcast, or write to us at troublemakers.thepodcast@gmail.com. So thank you so much, Rebecka, and thank you so much for joining me in the studio today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Hi! We hope you enjoyed the conversation on this episode of Troublemakers and feel inspired to stir up some good trouble in your own community. Do feel free to check out our other episodes and subscribe to Troublemakers Podcast in your preferred podcast app. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook as troublemakers.podcast. for all the latest updates, behind the scenes content, and sneak peeks of what's coming next. We also love to hear from our listeners. You can email us via troublemakersthepodcast@gmail.com or simply drop a DM through our social media. And hey, if you enjoyed this episode, take a moment and share it with a friend or leave us a review. It really helps us grow our community of troublemakers. Keep shaking things up.